Chapter 4. Veronica POV. What are we doing? Noah asked, coming into the kitchen of the guest house we're staying in. I tensed at his presence, the onion falling down from my hands. Oh, I said, as I glared at Philip for throwing the potato. Nothing, Philip said, grinning at me. It doesn't seem like nothing, Noah said, raising his eyebrow and looking around at the kitchen. Vegetables lay on the floor scattered, and the kitchen was a mess. You guys are at it again. Lion came walking in with a whistle. I glared at him as he raised his hand in surrender. Why the hell are you wasting food? Don't you know that we are in crisis right now? How can you even think of wasting it, especially at a crucial time? Violet said, coming inside the kitchen. Sorry, I said, sighing as I started picking up the vegetables. Philip following behind. She huffed before walking away. Lion followed, declaring to call him when dinner's ready. Will you making dinner? Noah asked as I nodded. I will help, he said as I looked at him wide eyes. Do you even know how to? I asked as he shrugs. It's always good to start new, right? He said as I smiled and nodded. You can cut the vegetable then, I said as he smiled and nodded. You too, Philip, I said, glaring at him. What? Why? He said as he paused on the kitchen door. I knew he was going to escape, but I would allow that, especially after he put me in the wharf of Violet. You never let anyone help me while I cut vegetables, he complained as I sighed and rolled my eyes. I took a basket of vegetables and put it on the kitchen counter. Why the hell is there this much vegetables? He asked, shocked. Well, if you haven't noticed, it's not the usual 2 of us dinner. There are no steaks. Now, help him cut the vegetables, I said as he grumbled and sat next to Noah. You both cook and eat together? Noah asked, a bit confused and frustrated. Yeah, during her school, she stayed in my house, Philip said as Noah's eyes widened. But your house is in dark terrain. Noah, Philip is the son of that scary bodyguard who followed us when we were young, I said as his eyes widened. He turned and looked at Philip, who sat there nodding and grinning like an idiot. But why starting at the dark terrain? Noah asked. Noah, I'm a dark wizard. I need to know about my culture, I said as he nodded slowly, trying to process it. I felt guilt in my heart as I lied to him. The real reason I moved to the terrain was to practice controlling my powers. It took a lot of pressure to convince Noah's parents to allow me to study in dark terrain. You two must be awfully close then, Noah said, looking at his half-cut veggie. I looked at Philip as he looked at me. Philip can also sense it, the amount of sadness oozing out of Noah. Let's finish cooking fast, I'm tired, he suddenly announced as Philip and I nodded. The rest of the night consisted of silence between us 3. During cooking, dinner, and even before going to bed. As I went to the girls' room, I saw Violet on the bed staring at me. I smiled at her and got on the bed, but I could still feel her stare on me. Is anything wrong, Violet? I asked as I looked at her. Just leave him alone, she said as I looked at her wide eyes. What? I asked, confused, sitting up. If you weren't in the picture, Noah and I should be long before dating. All through the training, he only talks about you, and I thought when you started to ignore him completely, he would be fed up and come to me. But you just won't let him go, she said as I looked at her in shock. You like him? I asked as she huffed. Like doesn't describe how much he means for me. I love him, and it hurts to see him suffer. It would be better if you just disappear, child of the Tadra King, she said before going to bed, her back facing me. I sat there shocked and surprised at what happened just now. That night I couldn't sleep thanks to her. The mark on my back was burning the more I cried. Guilt and sadness were filling my heart. Guilt for making Noah false for such a cursed girl. Sadness because he is suffering because of me. We're never meant to be. I'm the daughter of his kingdom's enemy. I'm a dark wizard, and he is a white wizard. But my heart acts for him. This just makes my theory more and more clear. I'm completely, utterly in love with the future king of white wizards. Chapter 5. Noah POV. Whoa, what happened to you? Philip asked, shocked, as Veronica walked out of the room. She glared at him as he raised his hand in surrender. Dark circle, red eyes, tight face. She looked awful. Didn't she have any sleep? You all right? I asked as I approached her. Yeah, she said. She looked away, making me sigh. You sure? You can stay behind. We'll go and investigate, I said as her eyes widened. No, I'm coming, she said, and I couldn't help the laugh that came out of my mouth. She looked at me confused as I grinned at her. All right, you can come, I said as she blushed and looked away. I knew you were still my same stubborn girl, I said as her eyes widened. I smiled at her shocked face before I dramatically worked past her, making sure to bump slightly on her shoulders before making my way outside. You're not coming, I called behind, seeing her still with no motive to move. Oh, yes, she said as she ran to me as I smiled and walked to the rest of the warriors. Small time skip. Please, Noah, the air is becoming denser by seconds. Please be careful, Chief Zilla said as I nodded. Make sure everyone is inside the magic sphere, I said as she nodded and bowed her head. Yes, Your Highness, she said. Ready? I asked my team as they nodded. As soon as we walked through the protection shield, a very vague smell hits us. Shit, that smells awful, Lion said, covering his nose. There seems to be a presence of Kazin, too, Violet said as I nodded. There is indeed a light scent of Kazin, and I know our powers will grow weak slowly because of it. The trees by now look worse as black veins covered them. What do you guys think? I said as I leaned closer to the tree bark. The poison seems to be spreading from the roots. It seems like black magic. Definitely dark wizards up to no good, Hayden said as Lion groaned. Blaming on us, white boy? Lion asked him, his tone not sounding pleased. Who else do you think can do such a thing? Hayden asked back as Lion growled and took a step to him. Stop. This is no time to argue and fight, warriors. Don't make a shame of yourselves, Veronica suddenly said as I nodded in agreement. She's right. You guys are a team. Don't fight over things you are not even certain of, I said as they sighed and nodded, muttering sorry. Hayden is right about it being dark magic, Violet said, crouching beside me. What do you guys think? I asked, looking at Vera and Philip. Since they are dark wizards, they might know more than us. Veronica was looking at a poisoned leaf, while Philip was beside her with a worried face. It's something dark, that definite, but I guarantee this is not the work of a dark wizard, he said as Veronica nodded in agreement. How are you sure? I asked at his confident answer. These are ancient wits. Philip and I have learned ancient extinct dark magic as a part of the dark wizard's learning system, and this seems to be closely related to that language, she said as she crouched beside me and pointed at a marking on the tree. So since dark wizards learn these languages, they can practice it, Violet said with a raised eyebrow as Veronica sighed and gave her a blank stare. No, this is demonic language. A dark wizard cannot endure such strong darkness, she said, and somehow I felt a cold shiver at the way they both stared at each other. Are you sure? I asked as she nodded. Just because we're dark wizards doesn't mean we're evil. Stop being stereotypes. Lion said as he snicks a peek at Violet and Hayden. Do you know there was a third word apart from terrain and F? Philip asked as I nodded. Yes, we have studied about it. The Vorlex, right? I asked as he nodded. This looks somewhat familiar to their language, he said as I looked at the markings once again. Wait, how come you know the Vorlex language? I've never studied that language on our schooling system. Lion suddenly said as I felt Veronica tense beside me. I looked at her as she glances at Philip with worry. Oh, Philip and I used to visit the library a lot. We were amazed by the things we learned about them and wanted to know more, she said as I eyed her with suspicion. She is definitely hiding something. Anyway, let's not waste time and keep looking, Philip said as I stood up. All right, let's go, I said. We walked deeper into the forest. I felt my power weakening with the increase in the scent of casein. I looked at the others, and they looked just as weak as me, or maybe more. Veronica seems the least affected, probably because she is powerless. You all right? I asked Violet, as she nodded and smiled. I'm fine, just a bit tight, she said as I nodded. I then looked back and glanced at Vero, who was walking beside Philip. They seem awfully close, huh? Violet suddenly said as I looked at her. They do, don't they? I said. She gave me a small smile. I'm sorry this happened. I know how excited you were to see her, she said as I smiled sadly and nodded at her. I will get her back. I know I will, I said, as she sighed and looked ahead. Prince Noah! I heard Lion shout as I looked at him. He was pointing to his side, his eyes filled with horror. I walked to him and looked at the direction as my eyes widened. A shiver of fear washed over me. It's a glass land. Eyeless it was. Now it was dried up completed. A pond was in the middle, but it was not filled with clear water. It was white, and there was a disgusting smell coming from it. What in the name of Lord Vermeer happened here? Violet asked as I stared in shock. Suddenly a shadow appeared from a cave beside the pond. Oh shit, stay close to me. And they all obeyed as they moved closer to me. My eyes shined blue as I cast an invisible spell around us. For a moment, my power flickered as I felt a bit tired. The others feeling my weakness joined in and supported the shield. What is that? Veronica asked in horror as the shadow becomes bigger and bigger. It's not human, that's for sure. The form was too fierce and big. The smell intensified more, and Hayden gagged beside me. An involuntary gasp left all of our mouths as we took in what was in front of us. Is it what I think it is?